Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about JavaScript functions. So, what is a JavaScript function, how to use them, and the use cases. So, a function is like a box that takes in something and returns something back after performing a task on the past argument. So, imagine a box that takes in a soda bottle and then returns the same bottle but opened. So, this is similar to the JavaScript, the functions used. In this article, we'll break down JavaScript functions. So buckle up and let's get started. So the table of contents, we do have why functions matter. Then we'll talk about what is a function in JavaScript, then how to declare functions. Then we'll talk about arrow functions. So this came in ES6. So ES is a standard for JavaScript that manages what JavaScript should have, what is released, what is not. And then we'll talk about parameters versus arguments, return values and how they work. Then we'll talk about function scope, enclosures, callback functions, high order functions, anonymous functions, and immediately invoked function expressions. Then common mistakes to avoid, and then a conclusion. So when I come here and start drawing, I want to draw a box. So I've just drawn a box. So this one is, let's call it fn for function. This box takes in a soda that is closed. So this is a soda. It has a bottle cap on, and then it returns to us bottle that is opened. This is basically what a function does. So a function takes in some arguments and then returns some arguments, and then if it doesn't return anything, it returns void. But it can still not return anything and do some calculations inside it. So it could return something or could not. The first thing you're going to talk about is the introduction and why functions do matter. So functions allow developers to break down code into reusable blocks. Instead of repeating code, you can write a function once and reuse it many times as needed. This promotes dry, which is don't repeat yourself code. So basically what we said is that a function is used to buckle up some pieces of code. So let's say this is function that calculates tax. Calculate tax. So instead of reusing the logic, so it might have like 30 lines of code. So we can say 30 lines. Instead of repeating all these lines of code for maybe employee A, in case you're calculating their tax, you have employee A, you do the same calculations, copy pasting all these. So instead of doing all that, we do have a function that consolidates all the functionality of calculating the tax, and then it takes in the arguments, which for this instant would be maybe the gross pay, and then returns us the net pay. Right? So it basically helps us to reuse code. Yeah. Or maybe you have a function that converts degrees to Celsius. So add degrees to Fahrenheit. You don't have to repeat all this code whenever you want to convert degrees to Fahrenheit. You expose a function. When you say the function is like a box, you just pass it what you need it to do. So in this case, you pass it degrees Celsius, and then it does some calculation, gives us Fahrenheit. So that means even if we want to change the implementation, we just go and change in one place rather than changing in multiple places. So what is a function? A function in JavaScript is a block of code that can be reused or called repeatedly and to perform a task or calculation. So think of it as a machine that you feed some input, it processes it and returns an output. So let's look at different ways you can declare functions in JavaScript. So the first way is using a function declaration. So this is the common way to declare functions. We use the function keyword followed by the function's name, then parentheses, and a block of code enclosed with curly brackets. So this is the syntax. So you use the function keyword, and then you give it a name, then you have the parentheses and the code block. So let me just open my VS Code and show you manually. So we said the syntax is as follows. So we have the keyword. Let's call it the function keyword. After that, we have function name. Then after that, we have parentheses. This one's helps us pass argument. And then after that, we have curly brackets. Which enclose the block of code. That's exactly what you need to know. So if I want to create a function that greets me, I could do function. We start with the keyword, and then the name, we can give it a name of greet me. Parentheses, this is where you pass dynamic values to the function in case it accepts. It is optional. And then the curly brackets, which now enclose the block of code, and then the block of code should return. So we say the function can return or not. So let's start with the either way. A function that does not return anything. So for the function to greet us, there's something that is changing, is dynamic, is the name of the person we are greeting. So to write in these are called parameters, and a parameter is a placeholder of an actual value. So when working with this, so I can say console.log name hello, then plus name. So instead of, so you can see this name is, we are not going to print hello name. We're not going to print something like hello name, because name is a parameter, and we say a parameter is a placeholder for actual values that will be added. So if I come here and call this function, calling a function, you call the name, and then you use the parentheses, and then we say TechWithTwin. So that's my name. So the actual value you pass to a function is called an argument, and a parameter is the placeholder of actual values that will be inserted later on. So this name here will come and replace the name. So this one will be kind of like, will be equals to TechWithTwin for this instant, and then you come and evaluate this as a variable. All right. So something we should recap is that a parameter is a placeholder of the actual values that will come into play, and then an argument is whatever you pass as the value, and then you can add as many as you want. So maybe you can say age, and you can say hello plus name, then plus you are plus age. You are years old. So I hope you can see what is going on. We can add as many variables as we want, and then you come here and make sure they follow the same order. So we can do 20. Then if we run this, you can see Carol you're 20 years of old. So what is happening? We said the actual values that are passed to functions are called arguments, and the arguments have to match exactly what is required by the function itself. So the function requires a name and an age following this order. So in case you don't care about the order, you could change this one to an object and say, we want the name, we want the age, name. So we can come here. Now we don't have to follow the order. We can say age of 20, and then name of TechWithTwin. So you could use that, and then, yeah, it should work the same. So it should work the same way. So let's continue. We can declare functions in two ways, we have said. So the first one is using the function declaration. So this one is function declaration. So this one using the function keyword. So we can say greet me, function greet me, and says console.log greetings. That's one of the function. You can use the function declaration and the name, and then you are good to go. The next one is called the using a function expression. So an expression whereby you store a function inside a variable. So we can say const, you're creating a variable. So to create a variable, you can use const. So const greet me to, just giving it a unique name, is equals to. So this, we are creating a variable, but assigning it a function. So we can come here and assign it a function that says sol.log greetings to, and then make sure you pass in a valid data type of JavaScript. Right? So this is the first way, function declaration, and then the second one is function expression. All right. All right. So let's continue. We have something else called the arrow functions. So an arrow function, this is the new and more concise way to write functions. It uses the function declaration syntax, but we change the syntax and remove the function keyword and add a fat arrow code block. So let's convert the greet me function into an arrow function. We'll call it greet me to. So we have to use an expression here, but yeah, so we can say greet me to is equals to, right? Now here we drop in the function keyword, whereby we drop all these and we start from the curly brackets. And then instead of opening curly brackets, we use a fat arrow, which is equal sign and greater than sign. Equal sign and greater than sign is equals to console.log greetings to. So if I can say greet me to, I call that function, and then we get greetings to. So this is a function, and this is the syntax of the arrow function. So whereby we get rid of the function declaration keyword, the function keyword, and the function name, because we are using an expression, which means we already have the name as a variable. And then as soon as we start parentheses, we add a fat arrow, and then the fat arrow goes to the code block. Something else to note is that in case the code block is one expression, it gets something we called an implicit return. So basically the greet me function is returning this. It's returning a console log. So let me just show you. If you want to have a multi-line, you have to have multi-line logics, not one expression. You could do the same thing as the previous function. So we still retain this, but inside here we add a fat arrow, and then yeah, that's it for the arrow functions. So these functions are popular because they are brief and they handle this keyword differently. And then we have a note better here. This method has an implicit return. The body is a single expression without curly brackets. The value, if the body, you have to have if. So if the body is to have a single expression, the body can get a single expression without curly brackets, as I showed you, and then the expression is automatically returned and no return keyword is needed. So if I create another function called const greet me3 is equals to an open parenthesis, fat arrow, and then you can return. So you can say return hello, right? So if I call greet me3, it will return something which we can store as greetings. The rest of the function we did not store their return because they did not have a return value. And by having a return, if you don't have a return value, return void. So you can say console.log greetings. All right, get that hello. So that's how you write arrow functions, right? And then as we said, function can either return a value or return void. By returning means give us back something. So if you have greet me one, greet me, we could return here, instead of saying greetings, we could return subtract a from b, then reserves a b. So we can return a resolution. So we can say return back to the person calling us, so b minus a. And then if we call this subtract from a and b, and then so we are structured, so we can do 5 and 10. And then since this is returning a value, it is not doing some output, we can store the result in a variable. So const res is equals to that. And then you can console.log res. So we got an error. So res, I referenced the wrong variable, but still. So we get 5 because b minus a is 5 because b is 10, a is 5. All right then, so we talked about parameters versus arguments. We said a parameter is the placeholder for the actual values that will be passed. So let's recap very fast. So we can say function greet me takes in a name, and then console.log name. So something else we need to understand is that what is a parameter, and we already did this, but we can redo it. So we said these are the parameter, this is the parameter, because this parameter is just a placeholder of the actual value that will be added, and then this is the actual value, and then we call it an argument. All right, so let's call return values. I already talked about return values. A function can either return something back to us using the return keyword, or it will return void. You can see when I hover over here, this is returning void. So in case I return the name, or maybe you can return name dot to, let me just return name. If you look here, it returns any, but because we don't know the value of name, so if I initialize this to an empty string, you can see now this greet me function takes in a name which is optional and then returns a string. All right, so a function can either return or it can't. If it returns, we can do something else with this name. So instead of just leaving the name as that, we can store this name that is returned in a function. All right, yeah, and that's how it goes. So function scope and closures. So function scope is let me just copy this so that I can highlight what should be done. So we do have a test function, and then it has a secret, and then this secret is not seeable outside the scope. The scope means the environment at which these curly brackets are. Think of this as an estate. So this is estate A, and once you enter the estate, you can see things inside the estate, the shops, you can see people, you can greet them. But as soon as you're outside the shop, you're outside the estate, you cannot call things that were in the estate. So I hope you agree on that. So you cannot call things that are already in the estate when you are outside, but in case you are inside, you can. And this is what this code block is doing. So we have a variable called secret that is not accessible in the outside. All right. Yeah, we get an error because secret is not defined. That means this one is a local variable that cannot be accessed anywhere else. So the next thing we need to talk about is closures. So a closure occurs when a function remembers variables from its outer scope even after the scope has closed. So if we go back, let me copy paste this. So we have an outer function that returns a new function called inner. And as we know, as a function, when a function returns, its execution stops, its variable that were in memory are thrown away through the garbage collector. And then how do we remember values of a function. So the only way to remember a value is by using something called closures. This inner function has access to the scope because it has access to the state, not to the state. But this function has already returned. So that phenomenon of a function, an inner function accessing variables of an outer function that has already returned is called a closure. All right, so you can see the closure. So if we call greet and we say greet is equals to outer, we call outer returns a function, and then the function itself console, but it still has access to the outer function's variables. All right. So if I do that and run this, you can see from hello from JavaScript, but you can see it's able, the inner function is able to get the local variable that was created when this function was being instantiated. So let's talk about callbacks. So a callback is a function that is passed as an argument to other functions. So what is a callback? A callback is a function that is passed in as an argument to another function. So we can see we do have callback. All right, so we do have greet takes in a callback, and as soon as it does something, it calls that function. So this is what we call callback, because we pass a function to a function and then that function invokes our function. Yeah, it's a bit critical, but it's easier to understand that a callback is a function that is passed in as an argument to another function. And then you can see if we pass this function as an argument to the existing function, it will still call it maybe at the end or some other stages. All right. So the next thing you need to understand is the higher order functions. So these are functions that either take other functions as arguments or return other functions. So this is an example of the map function. So the map function runs in a function. I hope you can remember what we did about this function. So this is the arrow function we talked about, whereby you can stripe it off as you would like, because this is exactly equals to function calc takes in a number and then returns num times 2. So this not returns but return. So this is exactly equals to these arrow functions. And then to redo this as an arrow function, you can give it a name, say const calc is equals to, we can give it a name, we can say calc, and then we said, no, we start with the curly brackets here, takes in num, and then you say the photo arrow and the code block, and then you say return num times 2. But we said whenever you have one expression like this one, we don't need the curly brackets and everything. We can basically return num times 2 here. Still the same thing. All right, the next thing you need to understand is the anonymous function. So an anonymous function is a function with the no name. All right, and they're mostly usually used as arguments to other functions. Or yeah, so if I rub all these and do this, so set timeout is a function. So you have a function. So this callback takes in a time handler, which you can pass it as my fn. And then you can say this exactly equals to what we had previously, because the previous version was striped and made as simple as possible, because you can see this is a single expression. So we can use an arrow function. So to create an anonymous arrow function is anonymous arrow function is an arrow function with no name. So if an arrow function is let's create another function for my function. So we can say const my fn is equals to curly brackets, and then like that. But we can make this one concise by doing const my fn2 is equals to, because it has just one implicit return, it will do something called implicit return. So it will immediately return the value that was provided. So if you go back here and copy the set timeout, so you see this is basically a function. We can even use another function here. So we can get rid of the function keyword and then do this, delete that, delete that. All right. So this is the same thing. It's just because this is a precise arrow function, still the same scenario. So finally, what we'll talk about is something called the immediately invoked function expression. So this is a function that runs immediately. So function greet me console.log greet, no, console.log hey TechWithTwin. And then to make this one an immediately invoked function, you wrap it into parentheses and then call it. So if you do that, you can see hey TechWithTwin, because this is an immediately invoked function. So you start with the parentheses and then call it, parentheses and call it. All right. So similar way you can do with arrow functions. And then finally, what we'll talk about is common mistakes to avoid. So don't forget the return keyword when expecting an output, misusing the this keyword, especially with arrow functions, overusing global variables instead of function scope, not handling functions arguments properly and in the correct order. So we say that in case you don't care about the order, you could use an object, because as soon as these params become too many, it will be very hard for you to track them. So finally is the conclusion. So mastering JavaScript functions is crucial for becoming a proficient JavaScript developer. Understanding how functions work, from simple declarations to advanced concepts like closures and high order functions, will elevate your coding. So that's it from me, guys. Make sure you subscribe and follow and share with your friends. Thank you.